We were both working with two of the biggest organizations opposing one another. So if you wanted to kind of orchestrate the perfect conflict of the strongest organizations, it would be that.
Hey everyone, I'm Scott Shigeoka, your host for the Bridging Divides video series as part of We're Not Divided. And today we're going to talk to Sheila and Glenn. These are two interesting people with an unlikely friendship. Sheila supported the HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, which is a LGBTQ advocacy organization that believes everyone should have the right to marry. And Glenn is a part of Focus on the Family, which is a fundamental Christian organization that believes marriage is between a man and a woman. So these two have very different views on marriage, yet somehow have been able to connect, understand each other, and form a friendship. They first met at a convening led by Braver Angels, which is a nonprofit that brings people across the divide to come together to meet and to find common ground and discuss the issues that differ between them. We're going to talk to them about how they've been able to form this friendship, even though the person that they are talking to has a completely different view on something that is so important to them. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I think we ended up sitting together at a meeting. We went around the table doing introductions, and I was just really impressed with Glenn. He's a captivating person, very engaging, and we started talking about marriage right off the bat. So we were sitting across the room from each other when we were doing introductions at the initial meeting, and I told the story of how in 2013 I had a non-legal wedding at the Botanical Gardens in Phoenix, and it was a beautiful ceremony with 170 of our friends, and it was just the most magical, fun evening that I can ever remember, and so much love, so much celebration that evening at our wedding. And then we went to a hotel in Scottsdale near where the Botanical Gardens are. We were both in our wedding dresses, and I had a piece of paper that proved that we had a suite on reserve that had already been paid for. But the folks at the desk couldn't seem to find a room for us, and they were pretty unfriendly. It took a couple of hours to try to get a room there, which kind of marred the evening. And so to be denied service on this most special day, our wedding day, was really heartbreaking.
And so I'm the guy across the table, the guy from Focus on the Family. So, people are expecting particular things of me. And I responded to her story in such a way, and I just said, I find that absolutely unbelievable that anybody would treat you that way. And, there was sort of surprise in the room of like, well, gosh, aren't you against this? And it allowed me the opportunity to go, yes, I'm against this. But in this situation, there are these nuances that are very, very important. And I think what happened in the room was like, okay, gosh, these are complex issues. It doesn't necessarily mean this hate versus love and, that these issues are much, much more complex than that. And I really connected humanly with Sheila and her story, not compromising anything that I believe. But when you bring that human angle into it, it doesn't mean that people have to switch their positions, but we can find out that, yes, these issues are more complex and more multi-layered than we tend to assume that they are. And even just the way that Sheila responded to me, to my response, was like, I remember thinking, wow, she's a very interesting individual and somebody that I would like to get to know more.
Glenn, he just heard that story and he really was touched by it, and that meant a lot to me.
I'm curious though, I think, what some people might be feeling is, how is this possible? It almost feels unfathomable, especially in the context of our culture. Is this a PR stunt, or is this like an actual friendship, and how does that work? Like, do you push away each other's ideologies that you don't agree with? Are you trying to move each other closer to towards your own? Are there certain topics you avoid completely? Like, how are you able to, be in right relationship with each other? How is that possible?
I don't think it was hard with Glenn because we just hit it off right away. But I think in general, it's important for me to be connected with other people. I am a blue Democrat in a red state. I grew up in Wyoming, a very red state, and I was deathly afraid of coming out as gay. I was pretty confident that if I had come out, that I would have been killed. And 4 years after I graduated from the very same college, a young man was killed for being gay. He was drug out into a pasture and tied to a fence and beaten within an inch of his life. Matthew Shepard gave his life for being who he was, and that's the environment that I grew up in. So my whole life, I've felt like I don't have the luxury of living in a bubble with other people who only believe what I believe. I've had to always make inroads and connections with other people, and I think my life has been great as a result of that.
Yeah, and I mean, in many ways, I mean, I live in a bubble, in a particular bubble, but I also speak on college campuses, secular college campuses, not, Christian college campuses. So I'm interacting with people who are very different than I am, and oftentimes extremely hostile, extremely hostile. So I know what it's like to be treated hostilely, but I also know what it's like to try to desire for myself to be heard and listened to, and ask me tough questions, ask me penetrating questions, but honest questions, seeking questions. And I try to do the same with, somebody that I disagree with.
I'm wondering, how does language play into this division that we're experiencing in our culture, specifically with marriage as an example, or anything that you both have had conversations about?
You mentioned equality, and, for me, being an opponent of same-sex marriage, and when the term developed and started being used, marriage equality, I immediately reacted so negatively to that because I knew the strategy of that word, okay, I'll raise my hand. I'm the guy that's against equality. If we want to put it in those terms, like, no, that's just not fair. It's a tricky thing when certain words are applied to things that back your opponent into an undesirable corner. And I think that's something that's important for all of us to realize, is the way I'm framing the debate, putting my opponent in just absolutely untenable light. And if that's the case, then we have to think, well, there may be a problem with my framing of it. And I think that's important. So to try to use language that does honor, if you will, to your opponent in the very best way that it can. Because words are loaded, and we have to ask ourselves, what am I loading these words up with? And what loaded angles am I maybe not aware of that makes my friend on the other side feel uncomfortable or not devalued, but made to be the bad person?
In another meeting, I think it was the next year after we had gotten together and become friends, we were standing off in a corner, and a couple of guys and Glenn were talking about the same-sex marriage ruling that happened in 2014. And they were talking about how the rainbow flag had been projected onto the White House. And they were really disturbed, and they felt like, oh my gosh, that White House is for all of us. And by projecting the rainbow flag onto the White House, it meant that the White House wasn't theirs. And I was so taken aback because I felt like it was the first time that the White House was mine and that I was a first-class citizen, not a second-class citizen. And so we had equally powerful experiences of that day. And it was great to find out that the other person felt that strongly about the White House, and also to understand that it could be hurtful to have something like that happen. So while I continue to celebrate that that happened, I can certainly understand why they felt so strongly about it, because I feel like the White House is mine too, and it should be.
And so I'm curious, why do you think this is important? Why do you think it's important for us to have this conversation and to demonstrate that it is possible and to encourage others to have the courage and to be hopeful about making connections across differences?
I mean, I would first start by saying, I mean, because it involves human to human, I mean, there's little that's more important than that, you know, of the dignity, the importance, the significance of that person right there that you're interacting with. How can I honor them? How can I learn more about them? How can I connect with them? And that I have the privilege to get to do that, you know, to learn from somebody else's story.
I'm reminded of my mom was a pastor's wife and somebody who worked tirelessly for the homeless and just a social worker, somebody who's really incredible in my life. And she always used to say, is it more important for you to be right, or is the relationship more important? And she definitely taught me that the relationship is more important. And I believe that in everything that I do, that my beliefs and being right in those beliefs are deeply held. But at the end of the day, the relationships that I have in my life are the things that make my life magical.